Hi, Kelsey. Thank you so much for joining the Scale Up Africa podcast. It's really good to see you.
Thanks for having me today.
Great. So tell me where you're based and how you got to where you are in terms of coaching social impact professionals through their journeys. Tell us a bit more about your story and how you got into philanthropy and social impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm based in Geneva, Switzerland. Here today, we're having an incredible heat wave. But most of my career was actually on the African continent. So I'm Canadian originally, started out my career in epidemiology and vertical health programming and worked with, nonprofit actors and the UN for well over a decade. Eventually made my way to Geneva, to the HQ of a UN agency, where I realized very quickly that I wanted to have more at an intersection with corporate partners. So I made the jump to philanthropy. So for the last decade, I've been working at the intersection of philanthropy, corporate engagement, private public sector engagement with all sorts of different actors. So left the strategy consulting world a few years ago and started my own company. So now I do social impact coaching, consulting, advisory, teaching, all that good stuff.
Fab sounds like quite the ride. And tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing in terms of the shift in philanthropy, right? From the traditional sort of aid and sort of charity model
Mm.
to more transformative, maybe catalytic philanthropy. What are you seeing with your clients?
Yeah, it's an interesting question and one that I think we could take from multiple different angles. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is whenever somebody says catalytic philanthropy, the first thing I want to do is pull up a dictionary. I'm like, what does that even mean? We throw these buzzwords around in the sector as if there's a common denominator or a common baseline, and there just isn't. Um, One of the terms that I see thrown around a lot these days is trust-based philanthropy. And we're
Right.
very lucky to have more and more data and reports and academics and practitioners publishing around this, the trust-based philanthropy, CEP, all these different institutes doing the
Mm.
good work on this. But I think what I'm seeing more and more is this conversation that dominates the stages and the panels at Davos and UNGA and WHA and all these, high profile events with
Conferences.
philanthropy leaders,
Mm,
conferences,
mm.
which are incredibly exclusionary to begin with, but that's a whole other topic. I'm there, so I'm there for a purpose, and I see these leaders having these conversations around trust-based philanthropy, and I see it trickling down in my clients because my clients are funders and big organizations and individual philanthropies, and the conversations are being had, but are we seeing it trickle down to the implementer, to the person applying for the grants, to the communities we're serving? Yes, in some ways, but is it happening fast enough? Absolutely not. And I think we're all getting really, really tired of the same talking points without seeing action moving as fast as we would like it to.
Yeah, absolutely share your frustrations. And I'm someone who hosts events and conferences and I attend them. And, there is a sense of frustration and just the speed does not match the scale, right? And even the
Yeah.
deployment doesn't match the scale of some of the challenges that we're trying to face. You're
Yeah.
talking about climate
Yeah.
change and equity. I mean, these are huge challenges, right? So the pace, the speed, the
Yeah.
boldness isn't quite matching the rhetoric and the huge productions we see at these lovely conference venues. So I
Yeah.
share that frustration, and so I wonder what you are and how you practice your coaching. Tell us a bit more
Yeah.
about your methodology or your
Yeah.
key sort of approach to advising those that hold
Yeah.
wealth and assets.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've come to this space from a different lens. There are some people that come to the social impact world from or the philanthropy world from the wealth advisory space. There are some that come from an implementer space, and that's really where I'm coming from. As working in global health on the ground with communities in places like Somalia and South Sudan and Kenya and Asia. I worked in refugee and IDP camp settings where I was supporting healthcare delivery and public health response and surveys and research and access to services. And what's interesting is I have been on the side of the coin where you are writing grant proposal after grant proposal, trying to get the funding, having your contracts not renewed, having your staff not being renewed, and at the last minute, and just seeing the instability of this sector. And I was one of the privileged ones who was on an international contract working in these environments. And then flipping over to then working on the philanthropy side and being more of an advisor, I have seen the journey, I've seen the burnout, I've seen the lack of wellness across the space for people doing this work. And that's really what drove me to become a coach. So I was a strategy consultant, a COO at an advisory firm for many years. And I loved the work. I loved the diversity of clients, but I kept realizing more and more in my consulting and advisory mandates, what I was actually doing was oftentimes coaching senior social impact leaders at foundations or corporates or in the CSR space, just around how to do philanthropy and social impact better. And what I realized is that in my 20-year plus career, I never really had anyone to talk to about some of these concerns around wellness and work-life integration and this identity crisis of when you work in social impact, your
Mm.
work becomes your identity.
It
So
does. It really does. It really consumes you. I mean,
yeah,
sometimes you're literally waking up thinking about how to solve all problems all the time. It does
the
actually
weight.
become it's just, it's of course the most meaningful, purposeful thing you could possibly do. One of the, I mean, of course,
Yeah,
it's about, medical staff, healthcare, frontline workers, but it's one of those callings that people don't actually realize the psychological, emotional
yeah,
effects of the instability around funding. And so there is a huge conversation about mental health in the nonprofit sector, the social
yeah,
impact sector, and challenging
yeah,
funders to be more, again, more bold, more
yeah,
acting more risk tolerant, more,
yeah,
ceding power and control, and just really trusting that those that they are enabling and working with to do what they're already doing, but just enabling them with the resources, the infrastructure, the healthier balance sheets to
yeah,
enable them to actually continue working within their communities and their places of places that they're located. So I think you and I were also talking about the need for funders to be, gifted with the time and space to figure how they're going to show up in this space. So
yeah,
I think you were talking about, we're looking at planning or facilitating a visit that is well curated for funders to come and just
mm,
see what Africa is like. A lot of
mm,
funders are curious about expanding their grantee pool and just learning about new
mm,
regions like the African continent, for example, but have no idea, no contacts, no
mm,
context at
mm,
all. And so what's your take on that element of your practice in terms of
mm.
giving that level of sort of restoration and also facilitating maybe new opportunities and ways of
Mm.
showing up in the space as a funder or asset holder?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because you and I were talking about this earlier that oftentimes philanthropy, we are in such a hurry because the social injustices that we're solving are urgent. It's emergent, it's crucial and important, and so we feel the need to go quickly. But the best relationships are those that are actually built slowly and based on trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about facilitating these conversations, these experiences, these exposures, I absolutely see value in that. What's interesting is I really feel this tug of war when I'm advising my clients to get to know new actors, find new grassroots partners, build those relationships, make it a partnership, not a funder implementer relationship. We have all this language to talk about those better trust-based relationships, but at the same time, we have the impetus to move faster that doesn't allow for that. So
Right.
I love the idea of, allowing these opportunities and exposure that happen outside of places like the Skoll Foundation World Forum and places that are just so exclusionary that not everyone can access.
And also
So I
so
think it's the
packed. I mean, there's so
combination.
much happening at these events, right? It's round
Yeah,
table after round table after, it's just so packed. And everyone's
yeah,
competing for attention. It just doesn't give the
yeah,
space to breathe and really
yeah,
assess how you are showing up. And so yeah, I
yeah.
think that I'm glad that, you think it's something that maybe is
Mhm,
more needed in the space.
mm.
Mm,
It's needed, but also just time and space to have these thoughtful conversations. I mean, and just to come back to one of the reasons I started doing coaching on top of this advisory and consulting work is I saw so many people in this sector not knowing where to go to have those conversations. If you can't go to your line manager or your funder or your colleagues because everyone is struggling with compassion fatigue and moral fatigue
mm.
and burnout and lack of sustainability, where can you have those? And I do see this happening more and more with funder partner relationships where those honest conversations can happen, but you need to curate the time and the space to do it. Because guess what? Having that over Zoom or having that over an email exchange is incredibly challenging.
Yes, yes, it really is impractical, but very common, too common, and yeah,
Mm,
I think that's something we're trying to solve through
mm,
this trip we're planning for next
mm,
year. So yeah, I'm hoping that we can maybe partner on that and see how best to
mm,
curate a really valuable experience for folks
mm,
like maybe your clients. So
mm,
tell us a little bit more about where you see the most value in terms of the clients that you advise.
mm.
What's the destination? for you? What does a really good outcome look like when you've kind of gone through that journey with your client in your process?
Well, what's interesting is I have different types of clients, right? So let's imagine the funder who is trying to be more strategic and thoughtful around their philanthropy. The process usually starts around education and awareness. I mean, and one of the things looking at family philanthropy is philanthropy is so unique in terms
Mm,
of issues around legacy and family dynamics and wealth planning. It's all bundled up into one. And you and I were having a conversation about this earlier.
mm,
So it's not just coming in an advisory capacity with somebody who knows the social impact of the philanthropy world. It's being cognizant of the nuances. If you think about the psychology behind philanthropy, there's a lot there. Of course, there's aspects of, ego and legacy and doing good for the world and community impact, but those are all blended into one, and it's not usually a simple conversation. And so those
mm.
conversations I have with clients around their strategic philanthropy is how can we do the most good while still staying true to what your values are? We need to have values alignment, particularly in family philanthropy. And then on the other side of the coin, when I'm working with organizations and social impact leaders from nonprofits, NGOs, foundations, and they're having challenges to just feel the immense pressure of the work and to do good as fast as possible, the conversations I'm having there are again around values alignment, but not losing yourself in the sector. We have this thing in social impact where it's okay to be, you have to be selfless, you have to give it up, you don't need to have a great salary, you need to work 50 hours
Yeah, yeah.
a day, all these things. And that's actually not the case at all, that no one would expect you to do in the private or the corporate sector. So it's helping social impact leaders to have boundaries around work-life integration that then they emulate for the teams and the communities that they're supporting as well. So it's really on both sides of the coin.
I love that. I love that you're tackling it from both ends. And yeah, just so much of that
Mm.
resonated. I mean, the burnout, the fatigue, and just the terrible conditions and the
Yeah.
psychological load of trying to do good,
Yeah.
on a shoestring or barely a shoestring sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, a call to funders to do better and just find different ways to make sure that we're really enabling those who are making the sacrifice and tackling these issues long term, are better
Yeah.
supported, just, with long
Yeah.
term capital that's required, in terms of the, philanthropic impact investments that go towards these kinds of things.
Absolutely.
Kelsi, what's your last word from you on just, the global wealth and philanthropy conversation? What are you seeing from, I mean, you're based in Geneva, a lot of
Yeah.
capital flowing through that country, Switzerland in particular. But what are your final words on how we can do better as a sector?
Yeah. I think one of the things I would say is that there's so much rhetoric around, how is the sector adapting? How is the global architecture adapting based on the collapse of USAID last year? And I think that's one piece of the puzzle. There's no doubt about it. But this is
Mm,
also an opportune time for anyone working in social impact or philanthropy to rethink the ways of working. We are redesigning the global aid architecture. We are redesigning philanthropy around trust-based philanthropy. The trends around donor advised funds and next gen wealth and the influx of capital coming from tech and AI and Anthropic, there's all this literature
yeah.
out there right now to show
Mm,
that the
hmm.
third wave of philanthropy is going to be different. So my, final departing words are always asking everyone to think differently about their role in the architecture. And just because we've done something one way to date doesn't mean we should keep doing it that way. And to ask everyone to think truly thoughtfully around what their role is in this ecosystem and how we can all do better, quicker, faster, but also with heart. We're all here for the same reason. We
Mm,
all want to have good days at the office or work from home, wherever you are,
yeah.
but to rethink your role and the repercussions of your work in this sector and just encourage everyone to do better because we can.
Do better because we can. Thank you so much, Kelsey. It's really good to see you and talk to you soon.
Thank
Thanks.
you so much.